They asked them who they were, but they couldn't answer. Wearing Japanese uniforms, speaking Korean, held in an American camp, these men were neither Japanese nor Korean. Until a translator said, "You are not the enemy," and changed their lives forever. It was autumn of 1943. In a small village in southern Korea, life moved quietly among the rice paddies. 19-year-old Minjun worked in the fields at dawn. His hands were covered in mud, his back burned by the sun. One day, trucks appeared at the village entrance. Japanese soldiers. For all the young men gathered in the village square, the order was clear: you will serve the empire. Minjun looked at his mother's face. Her eyes filled with tears, but she couldn't speak a word. To speak, to resist, even to cry was forbidden. Korea was under Japanese occupation, and they controlled everything. As the trucks pulled away from the village, Minjun looked back. The smoke rising from his home's chimney, his mother waving her hand one last time. Everything was shrinking, disappearing, fading away. They were taken north by train. Japanese officers shouted at them, orders pouring out in Japanese. Minjun didn't understand, but fear was universal. Everyone stayed silent. On the first day at the training camp, an officer stood before them and spoke in a harsh voice. "You are no longer Korean. You are soldiers of the Japanese Empire. Speaking Korean is forbidden. Korean names are forbidden. You are now Hayashi, Tanaka, Yamamoto." Minjun was given the name Hayashi Kazuo. That night in the barracks, he whispered to another Korean youth in the next bunk, "My name is Minjun." The other young man nodded, but couldn't respond out of fear. Even speaking was dangerous now. Months passed. They were made to sing Japanese anthems, memorize Japanese war principles. Every morning they pledged allegiance to the emperor. But at night, in the darkness, some still prayed in Korean, silently, fearfully. In the spring of 1944, they were sent to the Pacific Front, to Saipan Island. Minjun saw the ocean for the first time, blue, endless, terrifying. On the ship, Japanese soldiers gave them suicide attack training. If the Americans came, there would be no surrender. Death was more honorable than life. But Minjun didn't want to die. He just wanted to return to his fields, his mother's soup, the children in his village. Hell began in Saipan. American tanks surrounded the island. Artillery shells exploded without pause. Minjun hid in a trench, hands trembling, struggling to breathe. A Japanese officer shouted, "Surrender is shame! Die but do not live!" But Minjun wanted to live. When American soldiers approached the trench, Minjun raised his hands. 2 other Koreans were beside him, all carrying the same fear. The Americans shouted, giving orders in English. Minjun understood nothing, but he noticed that with hands raised, no bullets came. An American soldier extended a water bottle. Minjun hesitated, then took it and drank. As the water went down his throat, his eyes filled with tears. Why? Why weren't they killing him? When they were taken to the prisoner camp, they were registered. A translator came, a Chinese man working for the American Army. He spoke Japanese. "Your name?" "Hayashi Kazuo," Minjun said, out of habit. The translator stopped. He looked at his face. Then he asked in Korean, "What is your real name?" Minjun froze. No one had asked him in Korean for years. His lips trembled. "Minjun." The translator took notes and added softly, "You're not Japanese, are you?" Minjun nodded, tears now unstoppable. "From Korea. They took me by force. The translator took a deep breath and turned to the American officer. They exchanged a few sentences. The officer nodded. The translator turned back and looked at Minjun. "You are not the enemy." That sentence shook Minjun's world. Not the enemy. Then who was he? The camp was in Hawaii. Peaceful, by the ocean shore, thousands of miles from the war. Minjun and the other Korean prisoners were placed in the separate barracks. They were no longer kept with the Japanese. Even that was a strange relief. The first morning, they were taken to the mess tent. Smells filled his nose: hot soup, rice, bread, even the scent of meat. When he received his tray, he couldn't believe it. Rice, vegetables, a piece of chicken. He hadn't seen such a meal in the Japanese army for months. He ate silently at the table. The other Koreans beside him were in the same shock. An American soldier approached, smiled, and gave a thumbs up. "Good?" he said. Minjun didn't understand the words, but he understood the tone. It wasn't hostile. He nodded. "Thank you," he said in Japanese. But when the translator came, he remembered he could speak Korean. "Kamsahamnida," he said quietly. The translator smiled. "I'm sorry, what did you say?" Minjun felt embarrassed. "Korean. I said thank you." "Very good. You can speak Korean here. No one will stop you." Minjun's face tensed. To be able to do something that had been forbidden for years. Was this what freedom felt like? That night in the barracks, he spoke openly with the other Koreans for the first time. They talked about their villages, their families, their lost years. One cried. Another sang a Korean lullaby. Minju never forgot that night, because that night he found his lost self.
As days passed, Minjun adapted to the camp routine. The Americans gave them work, gardening, kitchen help, small construction tasks, not by force, but voluntarily. One afternoon, Minjun was working with an American soldier. The man spoke English, but they communicated through gestures. The soldier pulled a photo from his pocket. A little girl, a woman, and a house. "Family," he said, smiling. Minjun understood. Family. He had no photo in his own pocket, but in his heart was an image, his mother's face, his father's voice, the silence of his village. He held back tears. The American soldier touched his shoulder. He said nothing, but there was an understanding silence. That night, Minjun asked the translator, "When the war ends, what will happen? Where will we go?" The translator paused. "If Korea becomes free, you'll return home." "What if it doesn't become free?" The translator couldn't answer because he didn't know either. In the camp library, Minjun began learning English. The words were difficult, but he wanted to learn. Maybe one day he could speak with these people. Thank you. Home. Freedom. Each word was hope. One day, an American officer came to the camp and gathered the Koreans. The translator was there too. The officer spoke. "You are not Japanese prisoners. The United States sees you as victims. When the war ends, we will help you." Minjun couldn't believe it. Help? Would an enemy help? But every face he looked at showed sincerity. That night in the barracks, they talked. Maybe they really are different. Maybe war is only the leader's business, not the people's. Minjun listened quietly, but something inside him was changing. Who was he? He wasn't Japanese, but he'd also forgotten he was Korean. Maybe here, on American soil, he was becoming human again.
As months passed, camp life became routine. But within every routine, small miracles were hidden.
One morning, an American soldier brought a radio to camp. Music started playing. Jazz, swing, sounds they didn't recognize. The Koreans were first surprised, then smiled. Some stood up and began to dance. Minjun watched. No one had danced in years. War had stolen everything. But now, here, there was music. An American pulled Minjun. "Come on!" Minjun felt shy, but accepted. The first step was awkward, the second easier. By the third, he was laughing. That night in his bed, he thought, when the war ended, he would remember these moments, because these moments proved humanity wasn't lost. Another day, while working in the camp kitchen, an American cook showed him something. Chocolate. Minjun was tasting chocolate for the first time. The sweetness melted on his tongue, his eyes opened wide. The cook laughed. "You like?" Minjun noted quickly. "Yes, yes!" A small gesture, but for Minjun it was enormous. In the camp garden, Minjun started growing tomatoes. In the Japanese Army, he only took orders, but here he could create something. One afternoon, the American officer looking at the garden approached. "Good work," he said through sign language. Minjun smiled. Maybe words weren't necessary. Sincerity was enough. The camp had a small library. Minjun would sit there looking at pictures. One day he found a book about Korea, an old geography book. He searched for his village on the map, traced the borders with his finger. Tears fell on the page. The translator came beside him. "Do you miss it?" "Every day." "Are you sure?" The translator couldn't answer, but he placed his hand on his shoulder. That was enough.
Summer of 1945. An announcement was made over the camp's loudspeaker. Japan has surrendered. The war is over. The Koreans looked at each other. Should they feel joy or fear? The war was over, but what would happen to Korea? Minjun asked the translator, "What happens now?" "We don't know yet, but we'll find out soon." Days passed. News came. Korea had been divided in two. The North under Soviet control, the South under American control. Minjun remembered his village was in the North. His heart tightened. One evening, all the Koreans in camp were gathered. An American officer spoke. "We're offering you options. If you want to go to North Korea, you'll be handed over to Soviet control. If you want to go south, you'll be under American protection. Or you can stay here and decide later." Minjun was shocked. Options? For the first time in his life, he could decide for himself. That night, he couldn't sleep. His mother was in the North, but freedom was in the South. The next day, he told the translator, "My mother is in the North, but if I go, I don't know if I can see her. Will the Soviets allow it?" The translator looked sad. "I don't know, Minjun, but the choice is yours." Finally, he made his decision. He would go to South Korea. Maybe one day the borders would open and he would find his mother.
The day of departure came. Minjun and the other Koreans would board a ship. American soldiers came to see them off. They shook hands, took photos. Some cried. The kitchen cook gave Minjun a package. Inside was chocolate. "For your journey," he said. Minjun thanked him. Words weren't enough. The garden officer came. "You're a good man, Minjun. I wish you success in life." Minjun answered with a lump in his throat. "You reminded me I was human. I will never forget." As the ship moved, Minjun looked at the camp, the barracks, the garden, the library. These were years of captivity, but also years of rebirth. South Korea was chaotic. Cities were destroyed, people were hungry and miserable. Minjun was placed in a refugee camp, but he was different now. He knew English, he carried hope. He began working as a translator for American aid organizations. He became a bridge between two worlds. One day, a young American aid worker asked, "Were you ever held in an American camp?" Minjun smiled. "Yes, and there I became free." The worker was surprised. "What do you mean?" because for the first time I remembered who I was. Years passed. Minjun married, had children. But every night before sleeping, he remembered those days. The music in the camp, the taste of chocolate, the sentence, "You are not the enemy." And each time his heart warmed. War makes people enemies, but humanity makes enemies human. Thousands of Koreans like Minjun were torn from their identities by the Japanese Army. But in American camps, in an unexpected place, they found their lost selves. This story isn't just about war. It's about humanity, identity, and mercy. Because sometimes the person you call enemy is the one who reminds you who you are. And sometimes it's not captivity, but freedom that saves you. If this story moved you, don't forget to subscribe. We keep history's forgotten moments alive together. Because the past holds a mirror to the future.